Hi everyone! So for today's Tutoring Thursday video, I'm talking to you about civil rights leaders who broke barriers. And today is Angela Davis. She was a political and social activist, an author of several books, including her own autobiography, as well as a scholar. She spent her life fighting for the rights of oppressed people, especially minorities, Black people, and other people of color. So her topics surrounded the American prison industrial complex and other civil rights issues. Angela Davis is well known for her participation in revolutionary acts, and particularly her speeches. Her most famous speech was in 1997 called the Prison Industrial Complex. It was championing for the rights of prisoners as well as calling out the American prison system as a new form of slavery rather than a justice and reformation system. She was also a member of the Black Panther Party, an American revolutionary party that worked at defending their communities and protecting them from injustices and police brutality, as well as educating and uplifting the voices of many minorities and underserved communities. Angela Davis became very notable in the public eye in the 1970s. She was put on the FBI watch list due to her social justice activism, and she was sent to jail shortly after. A movement then started saying "Free Angela Davis" and the many like her who had been wrongfully imprisoned. After her acquittal and release from prison in 1972, she advocated even more so to abolish the American prison system after seeing all the flaws in it and all the wrongfully imprisoned people. She even created a group called Critical Resistance. She has inspired so many people through her activism, and I encourage you to learn more about her past this video as well as read her books, including her autobiography, her other books called Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, and her other book called Women, Race, and Class. Lastly, I will end with her quote: "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." Thank you for coming to this week's Tutoring Thursday about Angela Davis. I hope this inspired you to go learn more about her as well as inspire a little activism in yourself. Bye!
Hey guys, it's Coach Lisa Ray, and today I'm talking about Rosa Parks. So Rosa Parks was a civil rights activist who lived during the time of segregation. So for her, her story is, at her times the buses were segregated, which means that white people would sit in the front and Black people would be in the back. And one day she was on the bus, and all the seats for the white people were taken, and since there was white people standing, the bus driver decided to move some of the Black people from their designated area for the white people to sit there. And Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on the bus, and she actually got arrested for not wanting to give up her seat. And because she got arrested, that led to the Montgomery bus boycott. So that boycott was all African Americans were asked to stay off the buses, to stay home, to take a cab or to walk, but to not take the bus. And that boycott actually lasted 381 days. And because of that boycott, the Supreme Court declared segregation on public transit to be unconstitutional. So Rosa Parks was really big when it came to the Montgomery bus boycott, and she was really big in getting Blacks more rights. She was actually known as the First Lady of Civil Rights and also as the mother of the freedom movement.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Today is Tutoring Thursday, and today's topic is a civil rights activist that had broken barriers. My name is Coach Jason, and the person we will be talking about today is Roy Wilkins. Okay, so in 1923, Roy Wilkins became a reporter for the Kansas City Hall, and these publishers were actually serving the Black community. Eventually, Wilkins became the managing editor for this establishment. So once 1934 comes around, he ends up joining the National Association of the Advancement for Colored People, also known as NAACP. And in 1949, he actually directed the anti-discrimination program across the United States. So this is about when the whole civil rights movement started riling up and becoming a more serious issue around the country, of course. And sometime between the early 1950s and the late 1940s, he became the chairman of the National Emergency Civil Rights Mobilization. Like I said, this was just the beginning of the whole civil rights movement. And adding on, he actually helped organize the March on Washington, which was actually a pretty important protest back during the civil rights. In 1968, he served as the U.S. chairman of delegations for the International Conference on Human Rights. And finally, in 1977, he became the director emeritus for the NAACP. You're probably wondering what it was exactly that he did himself, but he actually assisted with many breakthroughs within history during the civil rights movement. I'm just gonna name two for now, and one of them is the Brown v. Board of Education. And this is just a Supreme Court case that involves the lawsuit of one person against a school district because they weren't allowing this person of color to go to school. And eventually this made a breakthrough to allow children of color to go to school with white kids. And the second breakthrough was, of course, the Civil Rights Act. And this was important because it allowed people of color to vote and it ended segregation. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in and watching my weekly show for Tutoring Thursdays. And I hope you guys stay safe and take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Hey guys, it's Damian. For today's Tutoring Thursdays, the topic is civil rights activists that broke barriers, and I decided to talk about Claudette Colvin because we don't really talk about her in history class, and she's very important. So, she was born on September 5th, 1939 in Montgomery, Alabama, and she is a retired nurse, and she was a part of the civil rights movement in the 1950s. She was arrested on March 2nd, 1955 because she didn't want to give up her seat to a white woman. There's a misconception that Rosa Parks was the very first person to do that, but in reality it was Claudette Colvin. When Claudette refused to give up her seat, many letters were sent to the NAACP telling them how brave she was. And actually, fun fact, the person that would read those letters was Rosa Parks because she was the secretary of the NAACP. The president of the NAACP wanted to use Claudette's arrest as a reason to boycott buses until they realized that this wouldn't catch white people's attention because she was darker and she was only 15 years old. So that's when they decided to use Rosa Parks because she was older and she was very well respected due to the fact that she was the secretary of the NAACP. This then left Rosa with all the credit, even though Claudette was the first to refuse to give up her seat to a white woman. Even though it took a couple years for her to get the credit she deserved, she ended up getting it, and she's a very empowering, amazing civil rights activist because she was the first to ever stand up for something that actually made a change in history. And she's actually still alive to this day, and she's 81 years old. So I just want to end this off with a quote by her. And it's, "I knew then and I knew now when it comes to justice, there is no easy way to get it." Thank you guys, and I'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Jenna, and the civil rights activist I will be talking about today is Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha P. Johnson is often associated with the Stonewall riots, which happened in the year of 1969. These riots and protests were in response to police brutality in the city of Greenwich in New York City. The P in Marsha P. Johnson's name stands for Pay It No Mind, which was often her response when she was asked about what gender she was. What was so monumental about these riots and protests in 1969 is that a year later, on their anniversary, the first gay pride parade was held in the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich of New York City. Though it does not seem revolutionary now, at the time homosexuality was considered a disease and a mental illness that can be cured if you went to enough doctor's appointments and was prescribed with enough medication. However, due to the Stonewall riots, change was made in 1973 when homosexuality was declassified as a mental illness and a disease. If you want to continue to learn about Marsha P. Johnson's story, there's a documentary on Netflix called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, which is very informative about her life.
Hi kiddos, welcome back to Tutoring Thursdays. This is Coach Elda and I'm going to be talking about James Baldwin, who is a famous civil rights activist, writer, poet, and essayist. James Baldwin was born in Harlem, New York in 1928, and today is regarded as one of the greatest spokesmen for the civil rights movement. During his time, he was considered one of the greatest authors because people believed that he could write about the experiences of being a black man or being a black person in America just very eloquently during a time of segregation and a time of deep racism. But because he felt like he couldn't write freely in America, in 1948, he left to Paris, France. And he continued to write in France and actually became very famous for his writings about his experiences here and the experiences really of the entire Black community in America. But during the civil rights movement, he came back and he continued to speak at public events or to politicians and on national TV. And he was doing these things during the same time that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were working as well. But once Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and a few other of his friends were assassinated, he returned back to France to continue writing over there. And he was actually given the highest honor. When he passed away, his ashes were sent back to Harlem, and they have been there ever since. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something interesting, and I'll see you again next Thursday.